the right side, to the 10, to the 5, touchdown! 6, going to the hoop, puts it up, puts it in! A fantastic play.
Welcome back to the second episode of the Magnolia Fields podcast. I'm Tanner Marlar. He's Cody Blaszszak. Today we're diving into 2A, the second installment of this brand new program here from the beautiful Mac South Sports Network studio. And Cody, we're starting off with some doozies, okay? Gonna go ahead and just jump right in. Why don't we? Forget dipping the toe in. Let's just go off the diving board, cannonball, and we're going to start off with Baldwyn today. The Bearcats got them at 6-4 prediction-wise. They're usually pretty steady. You know, they very rarely will put together a completely undefeated season because they play such a tough non-divisional kind of slate every single year. But they always lead it off with a tough game, and they're doing that again this year, opening the season against Kossuth. And Cody, there's a certain co-host here on this show, a very tall, fairly complected guy with some beautiful hair, might I add, that went to Kossuth, and I've got a little bit of skin in this one. I do. I have to say, I do. Last year, Kossuth took that win 28-0. And the reason I say this, obviously, go Aggies, but that game typically is a barometer for how either of those teams' seasons is going to go. Last year, Kossuth makes a deep playoff run. They get put out late into the postseason by East Webster, but they make a deep postseason run. Baldwyn, not the typical experience for them last year. Skunked in that game 28-0. If they can either win that game this year or make it a lot closer, I think you see a couple more wins out of the Bearcats in 6.
Yeah, you've got some returning stars, I would say, for Baldwyn. You get a returning running back. On top of that, you get your quarterback coming back, had 23 passing touchdowns last year, and Dylan Johnson. So a lot of talent returns on the offensive end. You also get a couple of defensive ends that are coming back that had quite a bit of forced fumbles last year. So you get some turnovers coming back, and that's always a plus. Going to have a solid season. Not a great season, but a solid season. Probably puts you in the playoffs. Could put you in the playoffs. Just got to see where it goes.
Yeah, just kind of got to see where it winds up. I predict they do make a playoff push. I don't know how deep they go, but I think they make it in.
If they're a team that strikes me as a
wild card,
winning 1 or 2 the first and second round of the playoffs, I'm just not sure they have it to go further.
I agree. On to Bruce. Again, we're going to go in alphabetical order for all of these divisions. Big game for them. Obviously, the rivalry game against Calhoun City, that game this year is being played on October the 18th. An interesting story about that game. So there's a bridge that runs over a creek that connects, or essentially separates, Bruce and Calhoun City. The winner of that game every year gets to claim the bridge or the creek. Obviously, Calhoun City has claimed that for a number of years now. But nonetheless, big game, big things on the line, big bridges on the line. However, I think Bruce takes a loss in that one. They wind up 5-5 on the year. Their non-divisional slate is not very tough. I'm looking at South Pontotoc, pretty tough game, but you're playing Thrasher and Nanawaya out of that group. That's 2 1As out of your non-divisional schedule. As you know, I just don't get playing down that much leading into your divisional slate. But what do I know? I'm not the coach.
It's just a tough schedule for or tough region schedule,
tough
I should say, for Bruce. And when you make it easy on yourself, you don't prepare for those games you really need to prepare for. So it just makes it a little harder. And then, like you said, you get a beast like Calhoun City, and it's just the tough gets tougher. They lost that game last year by 52. They lost 58-6. So, I mean,
and we were at that game.
We were at that game. So you talk about it, and yeah, claiming a bridge is cool. Would
cool.
I claim a bridge if I could? Absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, that's a game you want to win, but at this point, and at least in recent history, I'm not really sure Bruce has a chance to claim it. And even if they do win a game, I think it's hard to take it away from Calhoun City just because of what they've done.
Yeah, and look, when you get into games and divisions like this, a lot of people say, well, coaching really does matter. And yes, I think when the talent level is equal, coaching definitely matters. But when Bruce hosts Calhoun City this year, it's not a game of X's and O's. It is a game of Jimmys and Joes. And Calhoun City has got the better Jimmys and Joes. So I think Calhoun City takes that one again pretty handily. We'll get into Calhoun City in a moment. They're personally my pick to win state title this year. I don't see what is stopping them unless there's some powerhouse out of the South coming up. But yeah, Bruce 5-5. They'll make the playoffs just because there are only 4 teams in the division and they've got to go travel to play somebody, but they are not going to get a favorable round 1 matchup.
No, it's going to be tough. And like you said, Calhoun City stands in their way, and that's a game you want to test yourself with. It just sometimes it's not a test.
It's not much of a test. Speaking of Calhoun City, they're next on our list. First predicted undefeated team of the episode, Calhoun City Wildcats, 10-0. We think they have a perfect regular season.
And rightfully so. They had one last year. They had one loss. It was to Union. It was in the playoffs, and it was only by 1 possession. It heartbreaking way to lose, especially 1 possession, and you know you have a team that can win it all. So this is one of those teams in one of those years. You suffer a heartbreaking loss. The previous year, you've got guys returning. There's a lot you can build off of. You have that chip on your shoulder mentality. It's hard not to pick this team to win.
It is. And even if you look at the schedule, start off against Senatobia, you're playing Coffeyville. Coffeyville going to be a bad team. We talked about them last episode. Okolona, a 1A. You should beat those. Aberdeen. Nettleton's going to be a tough test. Nettleton will be a test for this Calhoun City team. The one-man band over there of Braylon Williams, who we'll talk about next episode. I think Calhoun City's got the defense to get that one done, though. East Webster, I think they can out-athlete. Hamilton, but Bruce is a win. I think Water Valley and Palmer, I think they sweep through their division and go into the postseason yet again undefeated.
And there's a guy on this Calhoun City offense that you really like, and Shane Farmer, just going to be a junior.
Yeah.
So I mean,
and you just listen to the metrics. 6'3", 193 in 2A football. That is a grown man. I personally think he's standing about 6'4". I've stood next to him in cleats. I think this cat is 6'4". He's probably put on some weight too. I think he's a little bigger than 193. Going to play tight end and some middle linebacker for them. You'll see him line up in the slot some as well on the rare occasion they want to air it out.
Yeah, and when you look at this guy, like you said, playing some linebacker, playing some receiver, Tanner, you're a guy that played football. You think it's easier to catch a touchdown or to force a fumble?
I'd say force a fumble.
He had 3 of them. He had 4 touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
Averaging almost the same is pretty impressive.
It is. And another guy on this roster I'm super excited to watch for football season's Trell Dureau. We got to see a lot of Dureau during basketball season last year, played above the rim, just a freak athlete. On the Max Preps roster, he's listed as 8 feet tall. Now, do I think that's accurate? No. However, he does stand at about 6'4", 6'5", and just is a freak athlete. You line him up on the outside, tell me who's getting a jump ball in 2A football over Trell Dureau.
If he's 8 foot, no one.
If he's 8
that's
foot,
exactly
no one.
what you got me thinking right now.
Yeah, if he's 8 feet, nobody.
You play in the wrong sport.
He plays basketball
He
too.
does
don't get
do
me
that,
wrong.
but you don't need to be playing football at all if that's
No.
the case.
No, but seriously, this Calhoun City team is loaded. They bring back a lot, and I mean a lot of talent. I think they've got one of the better, if not the best, coach in 2A football at the helm, too. Former Calhoun City Wildcat M.D. Jennings played for the Green Bay Packers. I don't see what is standing in Calhoun City's way this year except for a Union team who does return the Player of the Year for 2A.
And I think Calhoun City has a bit of an edge on that because of their head coach, who has played at every level.
Yeah.
I think that gives you an advantage because you play the high school level, you play the college level, and then you play the professional level. And what happens with that, Coach Jennings is going to be able to look at this and be like, I was a pro football player. I know how to fix these things. I've been in these situations before. Yeah, it's high school, but I believe this is something he can overcome. And if they have to face Union again, I think he's got a game plan for it. I think he went to bed that night not too happy about it and has been thinking since then, how are we going to stop this team?
Yeah, and let's be clear, they didn't just get dog walked by Union either. That game was 34-26.
Yeah, it was a one possession game.
Yeah,
8 points. That's all it was. It was a score and a 2-point conversion.
and we were at that game, I believe. Union Calhoun City. Union, some late game heroics out of the backfield, not even by the Player of the Year and the quarterback. The running back room from Union, who did lose some talent, really won them that football game. So I think Calhoun City is gearing up to make the run, and we get to ride a long shotgun, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, and real quick before we move on, Tanner, if you had to guess, how many high school football teams are there in the state?
Oh, you're looking at well over 200.
As a 2A school, they are ranked 64th in the state.
Yeah.
As a 2A school.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
Well, I mean, you're putting every single 7A above them, obviously, and then
You are, but that's what I'm saying, though. I mean, even though there are a lot of schools and then 7A, is a 2A school to be 64? You take that if you ask me.
you absolutely do. You absolutely do. On into East Union Attendance Center. The Urchins, I believe. Maybe not the Urchins. We'll see. I remember them having it is the Urchins, a very interesting mascot name. However, 5-5, they run the air out of the ball at East Union. However, don't really have a lot of the same athletes a lot of these other 2A schools have. I think they can muscle their way to 5 wins. I think they can get outran for 5 losses.
Yeah, I agree. This is another one of those teams. They might have 3 wins. They might have 5. It's give or take a couple here and there. And it's one of those games. They got to find a way to string wins together. It's as simple as that. They 2-1 in region last year, so not terrible, but you've got to get competitive games during the season, not pick up 6 losses and give yourself some confidence going into the postseason.
Yeah, one of those divisional wins last year was an overtime win against Hatley. They matched back up with Hatley this year on October the 18th. Obviously, Hatley wanting to get back in that one. I think that can be that swing game where they go from, 4-6, 5-5, maybe even into 6-4 territory.
I think Hamilton, too, they only lost 24-14, 10 points last year, more than a possession, but 10 points is still a close game. I think a little more effort, you close the gap, make things interesting late, and anything can happen.
Yeah, maybe you retained a little bit more talent, a little bit more size. We'll see on East Union, but I don't think they're making many waves in the postseason. On into Newton. Completely winless last season. Completely winless. The poor Tigers. I do think they find a way to get a win this year, though. They were close a couple times last year, I believe. But they've got to get that 10% better that we talk about all the time here on this show.
Yeah, there's about one game that was really winnable, and it was Heidelberg, where they lost 34-30.
Yeah.
And fortunately for them, they play them week 6, 9/20.
Yep, September 20th. They get
Close
Heidelberg.
game. That's one of those games, though, you should win.
You should.
Or you could win. You only lost by 4, but you also might lose it because it was such a close game. There's a chance for them to pick up a win this season.
There is. And I think they'd manage it. Again, get that 10% better, get to 1-9. On into Philadelphia. Philly, baby. The Tornadoes. Probably couldn't tackle their way out of a wet paper sack, but can win any track meet they get in. If you want to watch points being scored, go watch a Philly game because they have got athletes all over the edges of the field.
And we saw them last year against Choctaw Central where they won 70-39.
Yeah, they put up a 70-piece. Now, Choctaw Central wasn't a great team last year.
No, they weren't.
But it takes talent. It takes skill to put up 70 in a game, period.
They scored at least 15 points in every single game but 2.
Yeah.
And then they scored 20 points or more in almost every single game but 4. So, I mean,
they can find the end zone.
Yeah, they can find the end zone. They just got to put it all together. That's the issue they have.
Yeah, their big game, November the 1st against Union. And I have it right here in my notes. They did hang 70 on Choctaw Central last year. Got a lot of that talent back. Philly could be pretty dangerous this year.
The Tornadoes.
The Tornadoes. It is a fun name. And just to think of the history of that program, I think like imagine going to Philadelphia High School and being able to watch Marcus Dupree just tear people up on a Friday night. A couple of years ago, you could have went down, watched Tulu Griffin return kicks against high school athletes, which would have been worth the price of admission alone.
Yeah, that's for the way they play. Their mascot, the Tornadoes, fit them very well.
It does. A lot of chaos. A lot of organized chaos. On into Scott Central. Scott Central made a pretty deep run in the playoffs last year. We've got them predicted 8-2. They're going to go play some talent from down south on October 4th against Bay Springs. Now, Scott Central, again, kind of ran into the buzzsaw late last season, trying to make another deep run this year. I don't think that they're going to be your state championship level team. I think it's going to be fun to watch, though.
Yeah, they've definitely got some talent on that team. Definitely have an opportunity to make a run. Don't know if they can make a deep enough run, but they have a lot of starters returning, which is always a plus. You lose your lead rusher and Taekwon Bounds, but otherwise,
pretty much got the rest of the stable back.
Yeah, you got just about your entire defense coming back. You lose your interception leader, but otherwise, you're sitting really pretty.
And the schedule doesn't look just horrible. I mean, you've got Leake County and Leake Central, Tylertown, Morton. They're going to play Seminary. So I think that you can really see them kind of repeat, kind of just hit copy and paste on last year. They lose in the playoffs, but have a great regular season. Everybody's pretty satisfied, and everybody goes home happy with some juice boxes and some orange slices.
Be sure to listen for the name Marquavius Bradford. 13 tackles last year. He'll be a senior this year, middle linebacker. Dude could – you need someone to stop a play? Don't send it towards him.
13 tackles or 13 TFLs?
13 tackles a game, excuse me.
13 tackles a game.
A game.
Okay, I was going to say 13 tackles over the season. I think you could roll me back out onto the
a game.
Larry B. Mitchell Memorial Stadium field, and I could get 13 tackles in a season.
You're sitting about 130 tackles.
Yeah, 13 a game. 13 a game something. 13 a game is something. Okay. On to Sebastopol. Same story to me here with Scott Central. Really good team. They return really good production, but I don't think they quite have what it takes to beat the Unions, the Calhoun Cities, and stuff like that. Their lone divisional loss last year was to Union.
It was, and you and I have talked about it before. They return their now senior running back and Adarius McDougal, who almost had 200 yards a game last season, 186 to be exact, but that's a ton of offense returning.
That is also, he's on the all-name team.
That is, yeah.
He's on the all-name team. Got to be. However, like you said, I think Sebastopol, I just don't think they've got what it takes to beat a Union or a Calhoun City. I think they've got what it takes to be well worth the price of admission on any given Friday night, but I don't think they've got what it takes to compete with those sure enough big boys. I don't think they've got the offensive and defensive lines.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, McDougal can get you a lot of things and do a lot of things for you. It's you need help on the other side of the ball.
Absolutely. Into Union. I've got them at 7-3 this year. Yes, they returned the 2A Player of the Year. However, they lost a lot of good, solid production from last year's squad.
Yeah, and that's this is a team where you're going to be willed to a couple of wins because you have that returning Player of the Year. But he can't win every single game for you.
No.
And that's where the drop-off is going to come. They'll pull some wins out, don't get me wrong, and have some solid close games, but you need help. You can't rely on one guy to win you every game.
Absolutely. No roster listed. I would love to see who's coming back and who's not for Union, but again, going to be a very, very tough program. I would imagine, yet again, them and Calhoun City meet in the playoffs, and the winner of that, I think, is your state champion. And I think it's Calhoun City this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, don't get me wrong, both these teams are good, but I think Calhoun City is just going to come out and, like I said, I feel like they have a chip on their shoulder from last year. They want to win it. They've got a lot of returners, so and
it kind of feels like it's within this next year or two or never for Calhoun City. Because you look at the bottom end of their roster, there's not a lot of just freshmen that really jump off the page. There's a lot of juniors and now a lot of seniors. Last year, there was a lot of sophomores and juniors. I think it's got to be within these next couple of years for Calhoun City. They got to strike while the iron is hot, and it's hot right now.
And I also think, just looking at some numbers and stuff right now, the final ranking, there were Mississippi ranks for all teams last year. Union, as we said, defeated Calhoun City in the playoffs. Calhoun City finished 64th. Union finished 67th.
Yeah.
So I think even that kind of tells you, like, yeah, they're both really good teams, and Union might have won that game, but played again might be a different result.
Very well could be. Water Valley, final school here of our 2A coverage area. Water Valley, historically a very good program, hasn't had the success as of late. I think that kind of repeats this year. 3-7 is my prediction. They've got a big game late in October at the Boneyard. That is a tough place to win.
It's a tough place to win. It's a killer stadium name.
For those that don't know, that is Calhoun City's stadium name. They call it the Boneyard, which is just awesome.
It's a little bit intimidating if you think about it.
A little bit? You're telling me and my guys got to go suit up to play at the Boneyard? I think we covered a game there a couple years ago on Halloween night. How excited?
That does ring a bell.
How excited could you be to go and suit up and go play a team of very, very good athletes at the Boneyard on a Friday night, on a Halloween Friday night?
Well, when you put it that way, it's a little bit more intimidating.
I think I'd have to get sick that day.
I agree. Especially when you realize you walk into one of the best 2A teams
in the state.
Yeah.
Arguably the best. But yeah, Water Valley, I've got them 3-7 this year. They play that late game against Calhoun City. And that wraps up our 2A predictions. But got one question for you. Is 2A probably the most competitive division in our coverage area, do you think? Because you look around, you got Calhoun City and Union, those two just off the rip. Throw in Scott Central and Sebastopol, who have electric backfields of their own.
I think I got mixed opinions. I think they are, if you take it on what we know. I think if you look at 7A, it gets a little different just because there are so many question marks in the air.
Yeah, and we'll get to those question marks, and obviously in a later episode, but I completely agree with you that the 7A North half this year has so many questions.
Yeah, and because of that, I mean, all those schools are losing so much production and the big names and everything. You don't know what to expect.
I think a lot of the must-see games this year are going to be in 2A in this region. Calhoun City, Union, Sebastopol, Scott Central, those 4 teams, I think, are going to be heart-stopping action every Friday night.
Yeah, and I think what makes 2A special in a sense too is that they've got 2 teams in Calhoun City and in Union that are like your top dogs. Whereas you look at these other divisions, there's a school such as Louisville and 4A that is just miles better than a team behind them.
Nobody's beating them.
And I think that's what helps the competitiveness of 2A is they'll probably win most of Calhoun City and Union, that is. They'll probably win most of their games by double digits. They might have a close one every once in a while. But the championship game, the head-to-head matchup, will not be a blowout. That's what makes it special.
That is a complete toss-up. That is a absolute toss-up. And I love that. As it should be. Yeah. As it should be.
This Calhoun City team just, I mean, they have so much young talent returning that saw the field last year.
Yeah.
It's hard not to have high hopes for them.
I think that factor right there is super important when we're talking about, you've got a big sophomore group, you got a big junior group coming up. Sure. How many of them have played?
Yeah, well, when you look at their leaders, their game leaders last year, didn't throw the ball a whole lot.
Never do.
But your top 3 receivers are sophomores. You had 1 running back in the top 3 that was a sophomore. Total touchdowns, 2 of your top 3 were sophomores. Tackles, all 3 were sophomores. So they're just young guys. Throw a couple of juniors in there. There's a freshman here and there, but they're all young, and they played last year and led the team.
Yeah.
That's what Calhoun City is going to make a push because of this. And they might win it this year. Imagine when these kids are seniors.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about earlier. That little 2-year window for Calhoun City, I think, starts this season and ends after the next. I think it does.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption, yeah.
Because if it's not within those next 2 years, I don't know when it's going to be.
And I mean, unfortunately, depending on how Union does, Calhoun City could lose both years, or they could split them, or win them both.
Or win them both.
I think it's gonna be a fun little rivalry between the two of them. Yeah,
those
couple years.
Those two are on a collision course for certain. And
that's what makes it fun.
That's what makes it fun. It's 2-way football, baby. It's 2-way football, baby. The fields are brown by the time we get to when it matters, and I love it. I love it.
We wouldn't have it any other way.
I cannot wait to go freeze my tail off at the boneyard in October and November.
Done it before. It's time to do it again.
Absolutely. Speaking of time to do some things again, it's time to close the show again. That is it for our 2A episode. Next episode, join us for 3 through 4A before we end with 5 through 7, and then we really get into the heat of football season here on Magnolia Fields. I'm Tanner Marlar. He's Cody Blaszszak. We will catch you guys next time.